When I had my heart surgery, I texted the family chat, "Who's picking me up from the hospital?" My son replied, "Get a cab. I'm watching TV." My wife said, "Stay another month. It's nice without you." But that evening, when they saw me on the news, their 67 calls went unanswered. What I did changed everything. Please subscribe to the channel and comment below how much time you've got right now. The pain hit like a lightning bolt, splitting my chest in two. It felt like an invisible hand stabbed me with a sharp blade. I tried to breathe, but when I opened my eyes, a bright white light burned through my head. It was hospital light, surrounding me. Where was I? The room spun. White walls, the steady beep-beep of machines and tubes coming out of my arms like plastic vines holding me down. Those tubes were pumping medicine into my blood, tugging with every move. I tried to sit up, but my body screamed. A wave of pain tearing me apart inside. Something was very wrong. Thick bandages on my chest felt like a blacksmith had chopped it with an axe and pieced it back together. The bandages were under a thin hospital gown clinging to my skin. Every breath hurt, and I wondered what had happened to me. "Mr. Thompson, you're awake." A woman's voice. A doctor stood by my bed, her white coat crisp, her eyes kind behind wire-rimmed glasses. She looked about 50, hair tied back, holding a clipboard. "I'm Dr. Carter, your cardiologist. How do you feel?" "Like a truck ran me over," I croaked, my throat dry and burning. Talking hurt, and each word made my throat sting more. She glanced at the monitor by my bed, where numbers and lines kept changing. They meant nothing to me, but her face stayed calm and professional. "2 days ago, you had emergency heart surgery, a triple bypass. During the operation, your heart stopped for 47 seconds. 47 seconds. The words echoed in my head like a stone dropping into a deep canyon. Had I died? The thought swirled in my mind, and for a moment, I felt like I was in a dark void where nothing existed. "Technically, yes," Dr. Carter said, checking my pulse with cool fingers. "But we brought you back. You're going to be okay, Mr. Thompson. The surgery worked. You'll need to stay here for 2 weeks. Then you can slowly get back to normal life. We're giving you pain meds, and we're keeping an eye on you." 2 weeks. The words rang in my head as I looked around the room. It was small, with white walls, no paintings, just medical charts. A small window showed Dallas's gray sky, January clouds heavy with rain. On the bedside table, there were no flowers, no cards, no sign anyone cared. The loneliness felt like a heavy weight, worse than the pain in my chest. A nurse, Jennifer, came in. She was maybe 30, with a warm smile like an old friend. She checked my IV drip, her fingers gentle. "Mr. Thompson, I'm Jennifer. I'll take care of you this shift. Any pain? Need anything?" I nodded, unable to speak because my throat still burned. She wrote something on her chart and adjusted the IV. In minutes, the pain faded, like a soft wave washing it away. "Rest up," she said. "I'll check on you every hour." Dr. Carter came back and pulled a chair by my bed. "Mr. Thompson, we need to check your brain functions to make sure everything's okay. What year is it?" 2025, I said, my voice still weak but clear. "Good. And the month?" "January." The word felt heavy, like it carried my whole life. "Great. Now squeeze my hand as hard as you can." She held out both hands. I tried, but my grip was weak, like a child's. She nodded, satisfied, and typed on her tablet. "Your motor functions and memory are fine. The next few days are about pain control and light movement. We'll get you walking soon, but carefully." After they left, the room went quiet. Just the machine's beeps in a steady rhythm. I grabbed my phone from the bedside table, hands shaking. The screen, showed news app notifications, spam emails, and pharmacy reminders. I scrolled, looking for any message from family. Nothing from Susan, no calls from Scott. I opened our family group chat. The last message was 3 weeks old, Susan complaining about her favorite yogurt being out of stock at the grocery store. Before that, Scott asking if I could pay for his car repair because his car broke down. Not a word about my surgery, like I didn't even exist. I put the phone down and stared at the ceiling. Its acoustic tiles like a blank canvas for my life's memories. For 47 seconds, I'd been dead, and nobody noticed I was gone. The thought ate at me, and the hospital's sterile smell pushed me into deeper memories. It all started in the summer of 2020. I was in the backyard of our Arlington home, planting tomatoes under the Texas sun, soaked in sweat. The sun was blazing overhead, the air hot and dry. The pain hit my chest suddenly, like a tight band squeezing my ribs. It was so intense I grabbed the fence post, holding on until it passed. I told myself it was just the Texas heat, which always bothered me. But this pain was different, deep, and constant. "Buford, you're being dramatic again," Susan called from the back door, holding an iced tea she'd made for herself. She stood on the porch looking at me with little sympathy. "Come inside before you get heat stroke." I laughed it off. "I'm fine, Susan, just feeling the heat. At 66, I told myself I was still strong as an ox, just needed water and rest. But the pain kept coming, worse each week. By 2021, climbing the stairs to our bedroom felt like climbing a mountain. I'd stop at the landing, gripping the banister, my heart pounding like it wanted to break free. My breath came short, and the world spun for a moment. Susan would already be in bed, watching her shows. "You're getting old, Buford," she'd say without looking up. "Maybe cut back on those weekend projects and rest." She always said that, but there was no real concern. I never told her about the metallic taste in my mouth during the worst moments, like I was sucking on a coin, or how the world spun if I stood too fast. She was busy with her book club, chatting with friends about books, and charity meetings that made her feel important. I didn't want her to worry, but now I think she never would have worried anyway. Scott was even less helpful. At 28, still living in our basement, he shrugged when I mentioned feeling tired. "Dad, maybe see a doctor, but, that's expensive, and your medical bills will mess with our inheritance. Try some vitamins, they're cheaper." He was always talking about money, like my health was a burden. The first big attack came in March 2023, in the kitchen on a Tuesday morning. I was making coffee, cups on the counter, when the pain hit my chest like a sledgehammer. It was so bad I grabbed the counter, coffee grounds spilling across the linoleum floor. I collapsed, gasping, the pain growing with every breath. "Susan," I called, but my voice didn't reach past the kitchen door, weak and broken. 10 minutes later, Susan found me, still on the floor, struggling to breathe. "Oh, Buford, did you fall? What happened?" She helped me to a chair, but her attention drifted fast. "My hair appointment's in an hour and I'm getting ready. Can you get to the doctor yourself? I don't want to be late." I drove myself to the ER in my old Chevy truck, hands shaking on the wheel. A young doctor checked me, his eyes worried, but hands steady. "Mr. Thompson, you had a minor heart attack. We need more tests to see what's going on." Tests showed my chest pain wasn't from age or stress. My arteries were clogging like rusty pipes. In November, Dr. Martinez said, "Without surgery, you've got 6 months, maybe less. With a triple bypass, you could have 10 good years." I came home, hands trembling in the truck, thinking about those 10 years. Did I want to spend them with people who didn't notice I was sick? The hospital room's silence pulled me out of those memories. I picked up the phone and looked at the family chat again. 2 weeks had passed, and no messages. Maybe they didn't know. Maybe the hospital didn't contact them. Maybe there was still hope that 45 years of marriage and raising Scott meant something. I typed, all good, getting discharged today, looking forward to coming home. Deleted it. Too long, too emotional. Second try. Out of the hospital today. Deleted. Third try. Docs say I can go home today. Excited to see everyone. That felt right. Hopeful, but not needy. I hit send. The replies came quick. Scott first. Take a cab. I'm watching TV. I read it 3 times. 47 seconds dead. 2 weeks in ICU, and my son couldn't pause his show. But Susan would be different. 45 years of marriage. She'd get it. Her text came. Stay another month. It's nice without you. The phone slipped from my hand onto the white sheets. Those words glowed on the screen like a neon sign, announcing the end of my life. I sat on the bed's edge, my bag falling to the floor. The morning sunlight through the window felt like a cruel joke. My chest ached, but it wasn't the surgery. This pain was deeper. One Dr. Carter's scalpel couldn't touch. Nurse Jennifer appeared at the door, clipboard in hand. Seeing my face, she stepped in and closed the door. Mr. Thompson, you look pale. Chest pain? I shook my head, voice gone. She picked up the phone and saw the screen. Her eyes softened, sad. I'm sorry. Family's complicated. Complicated. That was one way to say it. Another was that I'd been a fool for 45 years, giving everything to people who saw me as a paycheck and a caretaker, people who liked my absence more than my presence. I looked at the discharge papers scattered on the bed. Medication instructions, follow-up appointments, no heavy lifting, guidelines for a new life. But now, those papers felt like freedom. I walked out of the hospital, legs weak, each step reminding me I'd almost died and nobody cared. The taxi driver, an older Hispanic guy, had kind eyes. Rough day at the hospital, amigo? Rough 45 years, I said, the words slipping out. He chuckled, glancing at me in the rearview mirror as we pulled into Dallas traffic. Surgery? I nodded, settling into the vinyl seat. The discharge papers crunched in my lap. Suddenly, I remembered another time I held important papers, hands shaking. It was 1982. Scott was a toddler, and I was 25, dreaming big in our tiny apartment. I'd saved 2 years for that motorcycle, a shiny Harley Davidson that made me feel alive when I started it. But kids need cribs, not bikes. We've got to sell it, Susan said, bouncing Scott on her hip. We need money for baby stuff. I polished the chrome one last time and put up a for sale sign. $3,000 worth of freedom traded for responsibility. I told myself it was temporary. When Scott grew up, I'd get another chance. The taxi passed a motorcycle dealership. Gleaming bikes stood in the afternoon sun, and my chest ached more than the surgery scars. Family can be tough sometimes, the driver said, turning onto the highway. Mine's like that too. Another memory hit. 1995. Susan and I were planning our delayed honeymoon, 15 years late, but finally possible. Springtime in Paris. I worked overtime at the factory for months, saving every penny. Then Scott got into college. Europe will always be there, Susan said, tearing up travel brochures, tears in her eyes. Scott's education is more important. 4 years of college expenses. Paris dreams got boxed up with my other postponed plans. We drove through downtown, glass buildings reflecting the gray January sky. I remember driving this route in 2003, exhausted from double shifts, while Susan watched soap operas at home. When do I get to rest? I asked once, collapsing into the recliner after 16 hours. When Scott graduates and gets a good job, she promised, then we'll have time for us. Scott graduated, then he needed rent money, then a car loan, then seed money for his graphic design business that failed in 6 months. The business loan memory hurt the most. 2010. I signed papers, putting our house up as collateral while Scott scribbled plans on a restaurant napkin. "This is our ticket, Dad. 6 months. I'll pay it back with interest." The business lasted 4 months. I worked 3 extra years to pay off that loan. The taxi turned into Arlington streets, past the school where I coached Scott's Little League team, giving up my weekends, past the park where I pushed Susan on swings during our courtship days, when she looked at me like a hero, not an ATM. "Anyone picking you up?" the driver asked as we reached my neighborhood. I thought of the text still burning in my phone. "Take a cab, stay another month. It's nice without you." "No," I said quietly. "I think I'm done with people picking me up." The house came into view around the corner. White siding, green shutters, the lawn I'd mowed every week for 20 years. It should have felt like home. Instead, it looked like a monument to my stupidity. I paid the driver and stood on the sidewalk, staring at 45 years of mortgage payments and maintenance, all for Susan's book club and Scott's gaming setup. The driver left, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a house that felt like proof of my biggest mistake. The key turned with a soft click, and I stepped into darkness. The entry felt different, foreign, like I'd walked into someone else's life. I hit the light switch and saw what my family had done while I was gone. A pile of mail cluttered the entry table, unopened bills and ads. Susan's shoes were scattered where she'd kicked them off, next to Scott's muddy sneakers. Nobody bothered to clean up. The living room was worse. Scott's gaming setup sprawled like a teenager's bedroom. A pyramid of energy drink cans sat on my coffee table, the one I bought with overtime money 15 years ago. Pizza boxes were stacked by my recliner. They'd been partying, laughing, living it up. I walked through their mess, signs of their comfort in my absence. The kitchen was a disaster. Dishes piled in the sink, takeout containers overflowing the trash. The fridge held expensive wine and premium ice cream, stuff they bought while I fought for my life. But my study was the final insult. They'd turned it into a storage room. Susan's craft supplies were stacked on my desk, Scott's old computer gear on my bookshelves. Dust covered the family photos I'd carefully arranged. 47 seconds. I'd been dead for 47 seconds, and they'd turned my personal space into a closet. I sat in the one chair they hadn't piled stuff on. The safe's combination was still Scott's birthday. How fitting. The safe opened with a soft click. Inside, a blue folder held my will, placed there months ago. I pulled it out and read it. To my beloved wife, Susan Thompson, the house and all personal property. To my son, Scott Thompson, all financial assets, including retirement accounts, to be divided equally upon my death. Beloved wife, I laughed bitterly, the sound echoing in my insulted study. The woman who told me to stay in the hospital because it's nice without me. My son, a 38-year-old man who couldn't pause his TV to pick up his dying father. I looked at the dust-covered family photos on the shelf. Wedding pictures of a young couple full of hope. Scott's baby pictures, innocent smiles and tiny hands reaching for the camera. Vacation photos I paid for but never enjoyed, always worried about expenses. In every picture, I was smiling. Provider, protector, fool. I opened my phone and searched Estate Attorneys Dallas. The screen filled with law firm names and numbers. Professionals who understood wills could be changed. That inheritance is a privilege, not a right. Jonathan Hill and Associates was at the top, experienced in estate planning and charitable giving. Perfect. I looked at my study again, the boxes on my desk, dusty personal items, proof of my family's disrespect. Then at the will in my lap. Tomorrow, I'd call Mr. Hill. Tomorrow, I'd fix the biggest mistake of my life. Tonight, I'd plan to give my family what they deserved. Nothing. The elevator climbed floor by floor, each number bringing me closer to justice. 15 floors up in a Dallas high-rise, Jonathan Hill waited, with the power to rewrite my family's future. A week had passed since my discovery at home. 7 days of research, planning, and gathering documents. I found the American Heart Disease Foundation online, a charity that helped families during cardiac emergencies, people who valued life. The elevator doors opened to a hallway lined with mahogany and brass. Hill and Associates was written in gold letters on frosted glass doors. Mr. Thompson. The receptionist's smile was professional and warm. Mr. Hill is ready for you. Jonathan Hill's office overlooked downtown Dallas, with floor-to-ceiling windows. Law books lined the walls, framed degrees from universities I'd never dreamed of attending. He was younger than me, maybe 55, with silver hair and sharp eyes. "Please sit," he said, pointing to a leather chair across his large desk. "I understand you want major changes to your estate plan." I sat, my folder of documents on my knees. "I want to give everything to charity, nothing to my family." His eyebrows raised slightly. "That's a big change. Can you tell me why?" I told him about the surgery, the 47 seconds of death, 2 weeks in the hospital with no calls, coming home to find them living it up while I fought for my life. Hill listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. "Mr. Thompson, I have to ask, is this decision made in anger? Sometimes, after a medical crisis, people—" "I thought about it for a week," I said, opening the folder and pulling out printed emails, bank statements, medical records. "This isn't anger, it's clarity." He carefully reviewed my documents. "You're very thorough. The American Heart Disease Foundation is a great choice. They provide housing for families of cardiac patients, fund research, support rehab programs. People who value life," I said, "unlike my family. We can structure it as a charitable remainder trust. You can use the house during your lifetime, get a small monthly income, and upon your death, everything transfers to the foundation." Perfect. I could live comfortably while knowing my family would get what they earned. Nothing. "For your wife and son? Even a small bequest?" "No," I said firmly. "They're adults. It's time they support themselves." Hill looked at me for a long moment. "All right. This will take an hour to draft. Are you sure?" I thought of Scott's message. "Take a cab. I'm watching TV." Susan's words. "Stay another month. It's nice without you." I've never been more sure in my life. The next hour was legal language and document prep. Hill's secretary brought in witnesses, 2 paralegals who knew me only as another client. "This revokes all prior wills and codicils," Hill explained, placing the documents before me. "Upon your death, your house and all assets transfer to the American Heart Disease Foundation. You retain lifetime residency rights and a modest monthly stipend." I read every word twice. No mention of Susan, no provision for Scott, just clean legal language that would turn my family's cozy assumptions into a different reality. The signing was simple. 3 signatures, 2 witnesses, 1 notary stamp. 45 years of supporting an ungrateful family erased in black ink on white paper. "I'll contact the foundation this week," Hill said, handing me certified copies. "They'll want to meet you, discuss media announcement possibilities." Media announcement? I like the sound of that. Public recognition for the charity. Public embarrassment for my family. "The foundation's office is in this building," he continued. 12th floor. Their media coordinator, Rebecca Mills, is great at handling stories like this. I left, certified copies safe in my jacket pocket. At the door, Hill shook my hand with respect. "You're giving a generous gift, Mr. Thompson. The foundation helps hundreds of families every year." "Families who deserve it," I replied, "unlike mine." The hallway felt brighter as I walked to the elevator. Behind me, Hill's office held the machinery of justice. Ahead, the Foundation's office waited with the power to turn private satisfaction into public revenge. 3 floors down, the Foundation's office buzzed with morning activity. The elevator opened to a bright reception area, decorated with heart health posters and success stories from grateful families. Mr. Thompson? Rebecca Mills stepped out of a corner office, all business efficiency and a warm smile. I'm Rebecca Mills, media coordinator. Thank you for choosing our foundation. Her office walls were covered with awards and framed newspaper clippings from successful fundraising campaigns. This woman understood the power of a good story. Please sit, she said, pointing to a comfortable chair across her desk. Tell me about your situation. I told her everything. The surgery, the 47 seconds, the loneliness in the hospital, the cruel text messages. Rebecca listened closely, taking notes on a yellow pad. That's powerful, she said when I finished. Your story could save hundreds of lives. People need to understand how important family support is during a medical crisis. If my pain helps someone else, it's worth it, I said. She picked up the phone and dialed. Channel 8. This is Rebecca Mills from the Heart Foundation. I have a story. A local man is donating his entire estate because his family abandoned him during heart surgery. The conversation lasted 10 minutes. Rebecca's eyes sparkled with excitement. They can send a crew to your house this afternoon. Perfect timing. Heart Disease Awareness Week starts Monday. The morning passed in preparation. Rebecca coached me on key messages, the importance of family support, the foundation's mission, the reality of cardiac recovery. Most importantly, she said to tell the truth about my family's abandonment. Don't hold back, she advised. People connect with real emotion. Your story will touch hearts and save lives. By afternoon, we were at Channel 8's studio downtown. The news producer, a sharp woman named Jennifer, instantly saw why this story mattered. A man donating his house because his family told him to stay in the hospital, she said, nodding. This will hit home with viewers. The studio interview went smoothly. Bright lights, professional cameras, questions I'd practiced with Rebecca. The interviewer, David Martinez, was a perfect mix of empathy and journalistic precision. Mr. Thompson, what went through your mind when you read those text messages? I realized love has to go both ways, I answered steadily. Gratitude is a choice, not an obligation. For 45 years, I put my family first. When I needed them, they chose differently. Why donate specifically to heart disease research? They saved my life when my heart stopped for 47 seconds. My family thought it didn't matter if I lived or died. After the studio, the crew followed me to my Arlington home. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains as the Channel 8 van parked in the driveway. Professional cameras filmed the house that would soon belong to the foundation. Inside, David asked more personal questions as the camera rolled. We sat in the living room, the same room where Scott spread his gaming setup during my hospitalization. This is where you were recovering after the hospital. This is where I found out they were living comfortably without me, partying, ordering expensive food, using my study as storage. The camera panned to the family photos on the mantle. Wedding pictures, Scott's graduation, vacation memories, all funded by my sacrifices, witnesses to my wasted loyalty. Do you regret this decision? I looked straight at the camera. My only regret is that it took me 68 years to realize my own worth. The crew finished filming by late afternoon. David shook my hand with respect. This airs at 6 tonight. I hope other stations pick it up. I spent the evening at a quiet downtown restaurant, my phone buzzing occasionally with Rebecca's messages about social media prep. The Foundation's online team was ready to capitalize on the story's impact. At exactly 6 p.m., I saw myself on the restaurant's TV. The news anchor introduced the story with dramatic timing. A Dallas area man is making headlines today after donating his home to charity, but the reason behind his generosity is what everyone's talking about. My face filled the screen. Calm, dignified, telling the truth about family betrayal and medical loneliness. The segment included footage of my house, an explanation of the foundation donation, and Rebecca's comments on supporting heart patients. The restaurant was quiet, but I could see other diners glancing at the TV, then at me. Some looked sympathetic, others angry on my behalf. My phone stayed silent through dinner. Rebecca had advised letting the story spread naturally before checking social media responses. By tomorrow, she predicted, it would be everywhere. Driving home, I wondered if my family saw the broadcast. They watch local news, usually to complain about weather or politics. Tonight, they'd see their cruelty broadcast to thousands of strangers. Tonight, they'd understand that 45 years of taking me for granted was over. The garage door opened to the same house I'd left that morning, but everything had changed. By tomorrow morning, Scott and Susan would realize their comfortable life was ending. I turned off the TV and went to bed, sleeping peacefully for the first time since the surgery. The evening news played as background noise in the Thompson living room. Susan flipped through her magazines while Scott split his attention between a video game and the TV. Leftover pizza boxes and empty soda cans were signs of their comfortable life without Buford. Another boring day, Scott muttered, mashing buttons on his controller. Nothing ever happens in this stupid city. Susan looked up from her magazine. At least we're free from your dad's constant worrying. Remember how he fought over every little expense? They both laughed, completely unaware their world was about to explode. The news anchor's voice changed tone. A Dallas area man is making headlines today after donating his home to charity, but the reason behind his generosity is what everyone's talking about. Scott's game controller slipped from his hand. The house on the screen looked like theirs. Same white siding, green shutters, oak tree in front. "Mom," Scott whispered, "that's our house." Susan's magazine dropped to the floor. They stared in horror as the camera panned over their property. This couldn't be happening. It had to be a mistake. Then Buford's face filled the screen. "Oh my God," Susan gasped. "That's your father." They listened in silence as Buford told his story to the interviewer. The heart surgery, 47 seconds of clinical death, the loneliness in the hospital with no family support. "When I asked my family to pick me up from the hospital," Buford said calmly, "my son told me to take a cab because he was watching TV. My wife said stay another month because it's nice without me." Scott's face went pale. Those were his exact words. Susan covered her mouth with both hands, recognizing her cruel message now broadcast to the entire Dallas area. "This is impossible," Susan shouted at the TV. "He can't do this. It's our house." The news segment continued, explaining Buford's donation to the foundation. No mention of family inheritance, no provision for Susan or Scott. "Call him." Susan grabbed Scott's arm, shaking it. "Call him now." Scott grabbed his phone, hands trembling, and dialed his father's number. The call went straight to voicemail. "Dad, it's Scott. We just saw the news. What are you doing? Call me back right now." Susan snatched the phone and tried herself. Voicemail again. "Buford Thompson, this is your wife. You call me back right now. This is insane." Over the next hour, they called repeatedly. By the 10th try, Buford's phone was completely off, every call going to voicemail. Meanwhile, the story was blowing up on social media. Scott's Facebook feed filled with shares of the news segment. Friends and neighbors commented, recognizing their house, expressing anger at the family's behavior. "Look at this," Scott showed his mom the screen. "Everyone's calling us monsters. They say we deserve this." Susan was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. "Where will we go? We don't have any money. Everything's in his name. The reality was sinking in. The house, bank accounts, retirement funds, all in Buford's name. They'd lived so comfortably, they forgot they owned nothing. By 10 p.m., they'd left 67 voicemails and sent dozens of desperate texts. Buford wasn't answering any of them. "He's lost it," Scott said, pacing the room. "The surgery messed with his head. He doesn't know what he's doing." "Or maybe he knows exactly what he's doing," Susan whispered, staring at the phone. "Maybe this is revenge." They spent the rest of the evening grappling with the weight of their situation. No income, no savings, no property. Scott had never held a real job, and Susan hadn't worked in 30 years. "What do we do now?" Scott asked at midnight. "How do we fix this?" Susan wiped her eyes and looked at the living room. Scott's expensive gaming equipment, her designer magazines, the comfortable life built on Buford's sacrifices. "We wait for him to come home," she said grimly. "And we make him see that family is family, no matter what." They positioned themselves in the living room where they could see the driveway. Susan made coffee to stay awake. Scott kept his phone charged to keep calling. Neither slept that night. They sat by the window, waiting for headlights, rehearsing arguments to save their comfortable life. But deep down, they both knew something fundamental had changed. The man they'd taken for granted for 45 years had finally stopped giving. They'd been waiting since morning, practicing words to save their cozy life. Susan sat by the front window, coffee cup trembling in her hand. Scott paced behind her, holding his phone like a weapon he didn't know how to use. The sound of Buford's key turning in the lock froze them both. This was it, their chance to fix the disaster they'd created. Buford walked in at 8:30, unhurried, calm. He found them blocking the kitchen doorway, their faces desperate and determined. "Dad," Scott stepped forward aggressively. "What's this insanity? We're your family." Buford slowly took off his jacket, hanging it on the hook by the door. "Family?" His voice was conversational, almost pleasant. "When I was fighting for my life in the hospital, did either of you call even once?" "We were busy." Susan's voice dripped with fake indignation. "You know how hard it is to manage everything without you?" "Hard enough to tell me to stay another month in the hospital," Buford said, his tone steady, but his eyes cold as ice. "Because it's nice without me." Scott's prepared arguments crumbled under his father's calm gaze. "That was a joke. We weren't serious." 67 calls last night, Buford noted, brushing past them toward the kitchen. "Funny how you find time when the inheritance is at stake." They followed him like desperate satellites, talking over each other. "Dad, please listen." "Buford, you're not thinking clearly. The surgery messed with your judgment." "We love you, always have." Buford carefully filled the coffee maker, ignoring their rising desperation. When Susan grabbed his arm, he looked at her hand with such cold detachment she let go instantly. "You have 24 hours to get out of this house," he said softly. The words hit them like physical blows. Susan stumbled back. Scott's face went white. "Where will we go?" Susan's voice was a whisper. "We don't have money." "That's not my problem anymore," Buford said, his complete emotional detachment more terrifying than anger. This wasn't the man who put their needs first for 45 years. This was someone else. "You can't do this," Scott's voice turned to a shout. "I'm your son. This is my house." "Your house?" Buford turned to face him directly. "When did you last pay a mortgage payment? A utility bill? What have you contributed besides dishes and demands?" Scott opened his mouth, but no words came out. The truth was too clear to deny. Susan tried a different approach, tears streaming. "Honey, I know we made mistakes, but 45 years of marriage means something." "It meant something," Buford replied, pouring coffee. "Everything meant something until you showed me how little I mean to you." "We can change." Susan's desperation was clear. "We'll be different now. We'll appreciate you." For how long? Until you need something else? Until I'm old and sick again? Buford shook his head. I'm 68. I don't have time to wait for you to become good people. He sat at the kitchen table with his coffee, opening the morning paper as if they weren't screaming there. The foundation takes possession next month, he said without looking up. You have until then to find a place. Scott slammed his hand on the table. This is our house too. Check the deed, Buford said calmly. Check the bank accounts. Look at any legal document. It's all in my name because I earned it while you lived off my work. The morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, illuminating their complete helplessness. For 45 years, they assumed Buford would always be there, providing, forgiving. They were wrong. Susan collapsed into a chair, finally grasping the severity of the situation. Scott froze, watching his inheritance vanish with every word his father spoke. When I get back from my walk, Buford said, standing and putting on his coat, I expect to see packing boxes. He glanced at his watch, 9 o'clock sharp, and headed for the door. Dad, wait, Scott started. 23 hours and 58 minutes, Buford said without turning. The door closed with a soft click, leaving Susan and Scott alone with the wreckage of their cozy assumptions. Outside, Buford walked the same street he'd walked for 20 years in what was called home, feeling lighter with every step. Through the kitchen window, he could see them still sitting in stunned silence. The sense of justice was surprisingly peaceful. Packing boxes were piled by the door when I returned from my walk. They'd taken me seriously. Through the front window, I could see Susan wrapping dishes in newspaper while Scott carried his gaming equipment to the car in multiple trips. I sat on the front porch, rocking chair with my morning coffee, taking in a clear view of their desperate activity. The morning was cool and bright. Perfect weather for a new start. Dad, this is your last chance, Scott shouted, struggling with a heavy computer monitor. We can fix everything. You had 45 years of chances, I replied, not looking up from the newspaper. Susan came to the door, hair messy, eyes red from crying. Buford, honey, I'm sorry about that message. I wasn't thinking clearly. That's the problem, Susan. You never think beyond yourself. The packing was chaotic, 45 years of accumulated stuff, and they had less than 24 hours to sort it all. Susan kept running inside for another essential item, while Scott argued about whether his old computer games were worth trunk space. The neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, stopped by around noon, drawn by the unusual activity. Everything okay, Buford? She asked, noting the boxes and commotion. Just some family changes, I said cheerfully. Nothing to worry about. She nodded politely, but her curious eyes said she'd seen the news. The whole neighborhood probably knew by now. Scott made desperate appeals all afternoon. First anger. This is complete insanity. You can't live without us. Then bargaining. What if we pay rent? Contribute to household expenses? Finally pleading, Dad, where will we go? Mom hasn't had a real job in 30 years. I've lived 68 years, I said calmly. I think I'll be fine. Susan tried every manipulation tactic in her vast arsenal. Tears, health concerns, reminders of marriage vows, memories of happy times. Nothing moved me. I'd seen this performance too many times over decades. By 4 p.m., both cars were packed beyond capacity. Clothes and items stuffed into every available space. They had to leave furniture, kitchen appliances, and boxes that didn't fit. We'll be back, Scott said, loading the last box into the trunk. You can't keep us away forever. You're welcome to visit, I said, with a call and permission. Susan stood by her car, keys in hand, staring at the house she'd called home for 20 years. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I never thought it would end like this, she whispered. Neither did I admitted. I thought you'd value what you had. At exactly 6 p.m., 24 hours from my ultimatum, both cars pulled out of the driveway. Susan was crying. Scott was furious, but they were gone. I sat on the porch until dark, watching the sunset over my quiet neighborhood. For the first time in 45 years, I was completely alone. The silence was beautiful. Inside, the house felt huge. Empty rooms echoed with my footsteps. No TV noise, no fights over money, no demands for attention or support. I went to the study and opened the desk drawer, where I'd hidden travel brochures for 20 years. Colorado mountains, Arizona deserts, national parks I wanted to see but never had time for. Time? Now I had nothing but time. The travel brochures had sat in that drawer for 20 years. Now, finally, I could open them without guilt. February passed quietly as I got used to solitude, planning my first real adventure. March took me to Big Bend National Park in Texas. I'd never camped alone before, never driven just for joy. The desert landscape overwhelmed me with its stark beauty, endless skies, ancient rock formations, silence stretching for miles. One evening by a campfire, I met Tom, a retired teacher from Oklahoma. "First time here?" he asked, noticing my new camping gear. "First time anywhere, really," I admitted. "I'm 68, and this is my first trip for fun." Tom laughed warmly. "Well, son, it's never too late to start living for yourself." April took me to Colorado. I'd upgraded my camping gear and felt more confident on mountain roads. The thin air challenged my recovering heart, but gentle hikes in pine forests gave me energy I hadn't felt in years. I discovered photography that month, buying my first real camera in decades. The mountains demanded to be captured. Snow-capped peaks reflected in crystal lakes, wildflowers in high meadows, sunrises painting granite cliffs gold. "You're glowing," Dr. Carter noted at a regular checkup. "Your recovery is remarkable. What changed?" "Everything," I told her. "I'm finally living for myself." The foundation's work grew through the spring. Rebecca featured my travel photos in newsletters, showing other heart patients that life after surgery could be an adventure, not just survival. "Your story has saved dozens of families," Rebecca told me over coffee in June. "They've learned to value each other while there's still time." But my favorite part was talking to new heart patients, men and women facing surgery, scared and alone. I shared my experience, not just the medical details, but the emotional journey of discovering my own worth. "Family support is important," I told them, "but self-respect is more important." Summer brought longer trips. Arizona's desert bloomed with unexpected colors. Utah's red rocks challenged my photography skills. New Mexico's ancient ruins connected me to centuries-old history. At 68, I was healthier than I'd been at 58. Regular hiking, fresh air, a stress-free life, and days filled with purpose changed my body as much as my soul. Tom and Sarah became regular traveling companions. We met at different parks, shared campsites, explored trails together. For the first time in my adult life, my friends were based on shared interests, not family obligations. "You seem like a different man," Sarah said one evening in Zion watching the sunset from a campsite. "What were you like before?" "Tired," I said simply. "Very, very tired." Rebecca's team showcased my adventures on social media. Pictures of an older man finding joy in nature, stories of family healing through honest communication. Inspiration for other seniors to pursue postponed dreams. Comments poured in from around the world. Heart patients shared their family struggles. Adult children recognized themselves in Scott's behavior. Spouses saw Susan's patterns in taking loyalty for granted. July ended with my return to Arlington, not out of obligation but by choice. The house felt welcoming now, my sanctuary, not a prison. I was looking at Colorado photos in my favorite downtown coffee shop when a shadow fell over my table. I looked up to see a familiar figure standing uncertainly. Scott stood hesitantly, looking different, cleaner, more adult. His usual gaming attire was replaced with business casual, and his posture was that of someone carrying responsibility. "Dad?" His voice was unsure. "Can I sit for a minute?" I gestured to the empty chair, curious. 6 months had passed since the eviction, and my son looked 5 years older, in a good way. "You look good," he said as he sat, tanned, healthy. "Travel suits me," I said, closing the photo album but not putting it away. How are things, Scott? Different. He paused, choosing words carefully. I got a job, a full-time position at an advertising agency downtown, designing marketing materials. I nodded, waiting for more. Rented a small apartment, too. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. I pay my own rent, buy groceries, do laundry. That's good, son. Scott pulled out his phone and showed me pictures. A modest studio apartment, clean and organized. Minimal furniture, but everything tidy and purposeful. How's your mom? I asked. She's learning to live independently. Got a sales clerk job at Macy's. She has her own place, too. He looked at his hands. We don't see each other much. Both busy with work. I sipped my coffee, studying this changed version of my son. The entitlement was gone, replaced with humility. Dad, I'm not here to apologize, he said suddenly. I'm not asking to come back home or for money or to change the will back. That surprised me. Then what are you saying? A chance to prove I've changed. Maybe we can grab coffee sometimes, like this, if you're okay with it. I showed him some Colorado trip photos. His amazement seemed genuine as I described hiking at altitude, camping under stars, learning photography from new friends. I didn't know you wanted to do all that, he said softly. I didn't know either, I admitted. Scott nodded, understanding more than I expected. I've thought a lot about how much of your life you gave up for us, how we took it for granted. The Foundation's work keeps me busy, I said, showing him a newsletter featuring my story, helping other families avoid our mistakes. We're a cautionary tale now? A learning opportunity for everyone. We talked for another hour. Scott shared details about his job, deadlines, tough clients, the satisfaction of earning his own paycheck. He showed genuine interest in my travels, asking about places I'd been, what I planned next. I get it if you don't want a relationship, he said as he got ready to leave. I know trust will take time to build, but I wanted you to know I understand now what we did to you, how wrong it was. I walked him to the parking lot. His car was an old sedan, nothing fancy, but clean and well-maintained, proof of responsibility. Scott, I said as he opened the car door, maybe we can do this again in a month. His smile was hesitant, but hopeful. I'd like that. No promises for anything more, I clarified. I'm not changing the will back. I'm not looking for a traditional father-son relationship, but maybe we can build something new, something healthy. I understand, he said. And Dad, I'm glad you're happy. Finally. I watched him drive off, noting he checked his mirrors at every turn, used his signals. Small things, but they showed he'd learned to pay attention to details. The afternoon sun warmed my shoulders as I walked to my car. Tomorrow, I was planning for Arkansas to explore the Ozark Mountains. Next month, maybe Maine for fall foliage photography. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom. Sarah, found a great campsite in Utah for October. You in? I typed back. Absolutely. Send details. 6 months ago, I was a dying man, ignored by family. Today, I was alive, healthy, surrounded by people in my life by choice, not obligation. The difference, I learned, was everything. I drove through Arlington's familiar streets, past the coffee shop where Scott and I talked, past Mrs. Henderson's house where she was weeding her garden, past the Heart Foundation office where Rebecca was planning next month's awareness campaign. I arrived at a house that was truly mine, a life I'd built for myself, carefully chosen. Some stories end with grand gestures and dramatic reconciliations. This one ended with something more valuable. A man's quiet satisfaction in learning he was worth as much as anyone else. And maybe, just maybe, the possibility that love could grow in healthier soil than obligation. The sun was setting as I pulled into the driveway, painting the sky in the same colors I'd photographed in Colorado. Beautiful, peaceful, and entirely mine. If you like this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. Thanks for watching.